Orland Park Mayor Dan McLaughlin. The following program is brought to you by the Village of Orland Park. I'm Mayor Dan McLaughlin, and we're at the New Orland Park History Museum this morning. We're very excited about opening this up after a year or so of preparation and gathering items, and looking forward to introducing the history of Orland Park to the citizens of Orland Park. We have a great history, so we're excited to get this off the ground.
Hi, I'm Trustee Jim Dodge, and we're here inside the museum with Mayor McLaughlin. So Dan, let's talk about the inspiration for this museum.
You know, I do a lot of traveling, so I go into some of these real small towns, and they all seem to have museums. I'm kind of a history nut, and I thought Orland Park's got a great history. Why don't we have a museum? So we started, some of the staff, Jill Hodge in my office and a few others started gathering items. We talked to the Historical Society. They gave us a lot of items. And then Jill actually started interviewing some of the old families in town, and they got involved, and they started giving us ideas and some items for the museum. So it kind of took off from there. But one thing that was kind of neat, I just happened by chance to be at a display in Oak Lawn, and there was a whole box of Indian arrowheads and tools, and they all said they were dug in Orland. So I contacted the guy, and he ended up donating them, which I think is pretty neat. So it goes back to telling the kids in Orland how rich our history is and how far back it really does go. It's not just since Orland Square was built, you know. Right. So here's arrowheads and tools that were actually dug in Orland Park or in the surrounding area. So it's kind of neat that we have that kind of history, and we have never put it on display.
I know you're a great student of history and a history buff, so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it started in high school where I had a history teacher that really got me into it, and I will read history about different events in history, and then I had this strange desire to collect items they come from that period of history. So I have quite a collection at home, and we'll be putting some things on display at the library in the fall, and we have a few things here, but I just enjoy history, and I know Orland Park's got a great history, and we just need to let the kids in Orland Park know we do.
I'm now with Trustee Kathy Fenton, and Kathy, you've been in education for a few years, so tell us a little bit about that background, but also about what this museum could mean for young kids and learning.
Well, yes, you're right. I've been in education for 34 years, and I'm actually retiring next month, so I'll have a lot of hands-on free time to help out in the village. But this museum, I think, is a wonderful opportunity for many of the children to not only learn the history of the village of Orland Park, but to have some hands-on. You can read many, many things in a book, but when you're able to come in and actually see the objects that you're talking about and actually maybe build things that could have appeared back then. And for example, we're standing in front of the train, and this community was a very big rail stop with all the agriculture and animals, farm animals and things like that. And the children today, they don't know that about Orland Park. They think Orland Park is Orland Square Mall. Right. So this is a great opportunity to let them learn about what their community really was before Orland Square Mall.
So, Kathy, what else? Where else could we go with this museum? What other things could we do?
I think bringing in, maybe possibly, considering it's a work in progress, I think we could bring in some more activities where when the students do come over on little mini field trips from the schools, that they would have actually things to do, and possibly bring in some of our older residents who've been here forever and just have them tell them what it was like before Orland Square Mall, what it was like before all the traffic and our new 6-lane highway that's going down the middle of town, what it was like back then. And I think that's when the kids get excited about where they live and what their environment is. And then from there they could go out to the Stellwagen Foundation and the Stellwagen Farm,
right,
and look out there and see what it was like, because everything out there is back to the 1800s.
Yeah, I love that idea about making this a living history, yes, connecting the generations. That's great. All right, thanks, Kathy.
You're welcome, Jim.
I'm joined now by Diane Chen, who I've personally known for many years, and she is a volunteer member of our board, and we're very excited about having her help us with this museum. So Diane, tell us a little bit.
Well, first of all, I'm very excited about today. This is the beginning of a long journey, but also the culmination of a 2-year dream. So I want people to understand that a museum is like something that's alive. It changes and evolves and is never the same. And we're just beginning the journey, and we need all the help we can get. You know, we'd love people to donate old items from their family, or, of course, money, or volunteer. We need a lot of help here to keep this thing alive and growing.
I think that's great. I think we all would like to see it become very alive and active and interconnected between people and our history. So,
Right. And
any ideas on how we can make sure we get the word out and get people involved?
Well, I'm on the communication and marketing committee for the museum, but it's more than just getting the word out. I think our job is to help people understand how important local history is. You know how people are all interested in their family genealogy?
Right.
Because they want to know who they are and how they got to be that way. Well, I think a museum does the same thing for a community. Once people understand more about local history, they'll get an idea about Orland Park's identity, something new that maybe they never thought of before, and they'll understand how it got to be Orland Park and what we've all inherited as members of Orland Park, whether we've lived here for 70 years or whether we've lived here for 7 days. We've all inherited this history and this identity, and we need to appreciate it and take care of it.
Diane, that's a great way to frame it, and I look forward to working with you as we connect folks with what our past is, and then we all collectively define our journey going forward. So thank you so much.
You're quite welcome, Jim. It's entirely my pleasure.
There we go.
Hi, I'm joined now with Trustee Dan Calandrello, who I think of the current board members has the distinction of being the only lifelong Orland resident. Dan?
That's correct. I'm born and raised in Orland Park, and actually I'm really proud that we're doing the museum because, you know, we have a huge history that a lot of people don't know. We're not just the mall. You know, life has started not before 1970, so it's really exciting. I see some St. Michael stuff, which I went there to school. It's really excited to be here today.
There you go. Let me, what are your favorite, give us a couple of favorite memories growing up in Orland.
Well, you're going to have to do Orland Days, you know, every year, Orland Days, and we went before and all the different places it was, and Orland Days Parade, and just the summers with Centennial Park and doing all that stuff like that. So that was a good time.
I'm joined now by Trustee Cara Ruzek, and she's been on the board for a number of years, and I didn't know this until recently. She has an undergraduate degree in history. Carol?
Yes, I do. So I was a history major along with a government major, and so I was really excited when I heard that we were going to be doing this, opening this museum. I think, you know, what a wonderful gift to the community, and all the volunteers who've helped make this just open today is so exciting for the village.
I'm joined now by Diane, who is the curator of our museum. So I have a couple of questions in mind, but first, let's tell everyone about your background.
My background. So in 2001, I started as an intern for the Historical Society of Oak Park and River Forest while I was a senior at North Park University in Chicago. And so that internship then turned into a position. So I became the research center director for the Historical Society there in Oak Park, and I was there for about 7 years. And then I left the museum field for a couple years to have my family, and then I came back and I started as the executive director then of the Historical Society in Forest Park. In between, I also founded a historical society in my hometown of Hillside, and I was there for about 8 years. And now I live here in Orland. My husband and I, we've lived here since about 2008, and we just wanted to get involved in the community.
So my sense is you have a lifelong and a deep passion for history, right?
I do.
Is that true?
I do. Yeah, I like the local history as opposed to the larger, institutions. I just think you can get more involved.
I'm curious, when did you discover, when did you know you had a passion or a knack for history?
I grew up with my dad loving history, my grandfather. My grandfather, though, was more into World War II history since he was a veteran, and he was also, he had an interest in the Civil War, and he was always watching documentaries and movies, all kinds of things, books and memorabilia. So I guess for my family, yeah.
No, that's great to hear. And I guess the way I'd put the question is, this is a journey for us as a community and as a board and as members of the commission. What else can we do? Where can we go with this? What's our vision?
oh man, the sky's the limit for this, because, I just want to see the community get more involved in this and take more ownership in the community in which they live in. And I just feel like you take what you put into it. You get, I guess, what you put into it. And I think that the community would just benefit from people loaning, or even donating their own personal collections.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's so much history that would make this all come alive that people have that they don't think about. It would be great if, as we go forward, make sure they know they can lend something to the museum so we can put it on display.
Oh yeah, because to one person they might think, this doesn't really mean anything.
That's his grandpa's, right?
Yeah, but somebody else.
Yeah. So thank you, and all the best.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm joined now by Trustee Mike Carroll, who's a longtime Orland resident. Mike, I think you moved out here as in the 70s?
1976, yeah.
Yeah. About how old were you?
13.
Yeah. Well, what do you remember about that year and about Orland at the time?
Well, we lived on the southwest side of Chicago in St. Denis Parish, right off 79th and Pulaski. And I remember it seeming like this was hours away. Probably only 30, 40-minute drive, but there was not much in between Oak Lawn and here back then. Right. So there was a lot of farm fields. It seemed like it was way out there. Now the trick, it seems like it's nothing to drive to the old neighborhood.
What was Orland like? It was bicentennial year, or bicentennial, excuse me, for the country. Yep. What was it like in that year, and what was Orland Days like during that time?
Well, Orland Days was, I believe at that time it was still off the John Humphrey complex. Okay, but I remember the fire hydrants were painted red, white, and blue for the bicentennial. My first memory was we lived in Silver Lake West. The mall was built, a structure, but only the 4 anchor stores were opening that fall or winter. The interior mall stores didn't open until the following year. So there were a lot of fields in between Silver Lake West and the mall. That's where I rode my dirt bike back then. It was really kind of a more rural community. So we got I think it was 18,000 people in the village when we moved here. Right. We got to see the population explosion that until I think Naperville blew up. That was the next village that really took that kind of a growth factor into equation. It was really kind of amazing to watch the growth of Orland Park.
How big was LaGrange Road in terms of lanes back then?
Well, it was 2. I only remember a couple of restaurants, Fox's, Farmer's Daughter, Pizza Pete, and that was about it on LaGrange Road. And I remember even, I think it was the 80s when they made it 4 lanes, there was already a study from IDOT saying it should be 6. So I'm really happy to see it finally getting there.
Finally, only a couple decades late. So I don't know, many people in Orland might not know this, but before you eventually became a lawyer, you were an Orland Park police officer. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was started out right after college doing insurance work. Didn't like it, so originally I started out as a volunteer with ESDA here in the village, and started working with the Orland Hills Police Department. Then got hired by the Orland Park Police Department. Put myself through law school, working midnights on the police department. So I have a real strong connection still to this day. I have a letter at home from Chief Tim McCarthy, who was the chief right before I left, and he was saying, I'll always be a member of the Orland Park family, which is kind of interesting now, going from a village employee to a village trustee. But yeah, I have a very fond memory of that time.
I'm joined now by Elizabeth Grad Christophilakis, which I think is a Greek word meaning wonderful volunteer.
Wonderful volunteer,
Is
sure.
that true?
That works.
She is one of the vice chairman of our board, and we're excited to have her here because longtime Orland resident and a deep interest in history.
Definitely.
Elizabeth?
I've lived in Orland Park for 37 years, which is an incredibly long amount of time, and I was a high school history teacher for 10 years, and so I'm really passionate about bringing local history alive and seeing the ways we can integrate that into our community.
Oh, quick question. Is there any one thing about Orland's history or history in general that really stokes the passion for you?
I think, the connection with the train is pretty impressive. I have 2 little boys who are 4 and 7, and so we love the train, and having that available, and then learning the history of the train and how it really helped this town develop has been really fascinating.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I have a 9-year-old son, and he's absolutely fascinated with trains. So that. Anything else in Orland history, or any recommendations for us as a community to make sure that this becomes a living history museum?
Oh, definitely. I think Old Orland in particular, where the museum's located, has a tremendous amount of history. And now that we're getting into late spring and summer and the weather's going to be beautiful, it's a great historic district. It's beautiful to walk around. There's parks and little shops and all kinds of things to do. And I think it would be great to see Orland kind of come out and support the local museum, but also see a little bit of Orland that maybe people aren't familiar with.
Yeah, that's great. We'd love to see the connection between Orland's past and then where we're going and continue to have that dialogue. So thank you, Elizabeth, for being a member of our board.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm joined now by Village Clerk John Mahalik, and one former clerk in Orland Park to another. John, tell us what your thoughts about the museum.
think it's great, Jim. I think the importance of our history is where we come from, who we are, and to get all this Orland history in one spot is really a great attribute to the community.
It's in the clerk's office, we're the record keeper of all the legislative actions and all the meetings, the official history of Orland Park. And one of my favorites was when I found that we had a thistle commission. Apparently thistle weeds were a problem early in Orland's history. Talk to us a little bit about how far back the records go.
It's really unnerving that we're surviving without the thistle commission. But we have records back to the 1900s. You can come into the clerk's office anytime and see some of the records of the minutes of the meetings back from John Humphrey's days in the early 1900s. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it would be great if some of the folks who are coming to the museum see that putting in a water main in the way back cost tens of dollars, right. As opposed to the tens of millions we have to spend these days. I'm here now with Kate Coghill and Maureen Wentz, both of who have been longtime Orland residents and friends of the village and friends of mine. So I'd like to ask both of you, talk a little bit about when you first came into the village, and then briefly all the changes that you've seen through that time. So we'll start with Kay. Okay.
Late 1960s, came to Orland. The one stoplight at LaGrange and 143rd was memorable.
How many stoplights and how many lanes at that time?
I think it was just 2 lanes. Maybe it was 4 lanes. I don't remember that. I just was impressed with the one stoplight. And then I'd go to 151st and turn on to a gravel road. And that was what my first memories of Orland. There was no mall. It was Rafus's sod fields.
Right.
And then my father-in-law at Silver Lake Country Club would have many fights with Mr. Rafus over his pig farm. Because in the summer, the prevailing winds came from the southwest, and that blew over Rafus's pig farm, which is now Liberty School. And that would greet our golfers on Sunday mornings. So my father-in-law was quite perturbed about that.
Oh, I can imagine. There's plenty of things that can go wrong for a person golfing. The last thing you need is that the aroma, right?
Yeah.
All right. Maureen, tell us about some of when you came to Orland and some of your memories.
Oh, we moved to Orland in 1966, and one of my biggest memories was the following year when we had that huge snowstorm. And we had 5 acres with horses here in Orland, and we saddled up the horse, rode him to 143rd to Nagel's gas station to get food for the kids. And that was a very simple way of solving some problems in those days. And I also remember, as Kay did, the one stoplight, the one grocery store, one bank, one drugstore. What was so nice, though, is you knew everybody. You knew the owners of the businesses. It was a very personable town then. And it has grown, and I'm glad to be part of its growth and fortunate now to be able to work for the village that I've lived in so long and give back.
There you go. I hadn't thought about that. I lived at 64th and Austin at the time in the city when that snowstorm came, and I remember that. So that's a fun thought to think about, riding a horse to go get some provisions.
Yes, well, I'll tell you what, it sure came in handy because those kids needed food and they were young, and Nagel's was right there at 143rd and Wolf Road.
Right, got it.
So we rode right down Wolf Road on the horse with gunny sacks hanging over the saddle horn and brought back the food.
How historical!
Too bad there's no pictures or video of that. So just as we go forward, any ideas or suggestions you guys have for this museum and how we get current people in Orland connected to Orland's history? Any thoughts, Kay?
I just think it's wonderful that this is being done. I think this is a great start. I know it's going to be a work in progress forever, and I think it's wonderful for our children to be able to come here. I think they've been talking, I guess, about having hands-on things for kids, and I think it's going to be wonderful. It's going to be great, like everything in Orland has turned out to be.
Very kind of. And anything that you and the family or the Silver Lake might have that could be helpful that we could put on loan would be. So as both of you think about this, definitely if there's any mementos or any things we could put on here and display, that'd be great. So Maureen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I like to think about the time my father talked about driving a horse and buggy out here from Chicago on Southwest Haverey when it was a gravel road. And there's a lot of history there in my family. And my aunt was born here in Orland in the early 1900s, and I'm going to try to find some information on her.
That would be great. So thank you both, and definitely help us make this better. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
As we wrap this up, just a couple of quick notes. We're at the old Village Hall, which was built in the 1960s by some Orland Park volunteers. A number of them were firefighters. But historically, this site has always been the site of the Village Hall. John Humphrey, who was the first mayor and, if you will, a founder of Orland Park, he would walk across the street to where they held the early meetings. So we'd love you to come out and join us at this museum. And then, as always, let's connect our past to our future and come join us. Thank you.